Good morning. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. It's February 26, 2023. Trying to bring up the correct screen. Exodus. Here we go. We're in the book of Exodus. God is explaining his law, and I want to emphasize that Israel just coming out of Egypt are like babies. The scripture says you are babes in Christ and you have need of milk, and I wish you could chew on meat, but you can only drink milk because you're not ready for meat yet. And so God recognizes that we go through stages. The law that he's laying down for the children of Israel is what a parent would lay down for a child. I always pick on, only because it's right there, it always jumps in my head. I pick on the little socket. Something goes in the socket, but a baby doesn't understand what it is. Your computer, the television, kid doesn't understand that. He's going to stick a knife in or a fork in or so even though you're saying no, 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 eventually there's going to be a yes when the child is older and understand what sorts of things can go in the socket. But at first you just have to say no, 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 no. And it sounds like you can never ever use that socket. But basically, for a baby, that's what you have to say. You can't say to the baby, no, except sometimes when you feel like it, because they don't have the knowledge to differentiate what's a good thing to stick in the socket and what's a bad thing to stick in the socket. So you just have to say no. Then when they're older, you can say yes. God's giving the no right now. No, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Later in his law, later through the life of Christ, he gives the yeses. Here's what you can do. Because thank God for sockets that we can plug in a fan in the summertime when it's hot. All the stuff that we can plug into a socket, yay. Uh, but for a baby, it's like the most dangerous thing in the world. The whole world is dangerous, right? Um, little Tide Pods that, yay, because we can wash our clothes. But no, don't touch that Tide Pod because you'll just eat it. That's right. So the world is full of no's for babies, right? No, don't run out in the street. No, don't grab that knife. No. Eventually there'll be the yeses, but the baby has to go to a point to hear the yeses. You can't really give them any yeses. Yes, you can eat whatever you want. No, you can't. It has to be no, 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 no. Right? So God intended for us to have the entire Bible, but he's starting out in the wilderness with just no's for these babies who are just now coming out of, they've been in Egyptian culture at least a couple hundred years. They don't know who God is. And he has to, they're just babies. Let me give you all the no's. So it's the difference between, last week I was explaining the difference between the spirit and the letter of the law. Christ even explains that. Paul explains that. Um, he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6, let me cut down to verse 6. He's talking about Christ, he says, who's made us sufficient ministers of the new covenant. And the new covenant doesn't eliminate the old covenant, it just clarifies it, right? Uh, it was to the baby, it's not, well, now that you're older, you can stick knives in there. No, you still can't stick knives in the socket. All that no was true. But now there's 1,000 yeses because of all the wonderful things that you can stick in the socket, right? So I've got a new set of laws. They don't eliminate the old, so the olds were horrible, but they're additions now that you're older. So he's made us sufficient. Who made us all sufficient as ministers of the new covenant, not of the letter, but of the spirit. And so Paul is comparing it, the letter of the law, the spirit of the law. For the letter kills, meaning the letter is always no. Um, it's going to be, this is going to kill you. And that's what you're saying to your babies, right? You run down the street, you're gonna die. You stick a knife in there, you're gonna die. You eat that dishwater, you're gonna die. So the letter, it just says, here's the punishment, spanking for all, for don't do that, don't eat that snake, right? It's just punishment. The letter is kills, meaning here's the death has to be the punishment to keep you from doing it. I got to do this to keep you from doing it because you'll just do it. You'll just stick that fork in there. No, there's got to be to keep you from. You have to think if I do that, mom's gonna slap my hand, so I won't stick the fork in. I have no idea why I can't, but I guess I won't because I don't want that punishment. So the letter kills because God kept saying, if you do this, you'll die. If you do this, you'll die. You'll die. Just to stop them from doing it. It says, but the Spirit gives life. So now Jesus came and said, but here are all the good things that you can do that will bring life. And here, so this is, I've come to give life and life more abundantly. That was just not a metaphor. He literally was talking about in comparison to the things that used to bring death. If you do this, you'll die. I've come to say, if you do this, you'll live, right? In verse 7 of 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7, but if the ministry of death, written and engraved on stones, was glorious, and when Moses came out he had the Ten Commandments and his face was glowing because that's still God's word, even though it's a lot of no's and don'ts and this will kill you. It still was glorious because it came from the mouth of God. So he says, if the ministry of death, which, you do that, you'll die, written and engraved on stones was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance. They couldn't even, he's shining because he'd been in the presence of God, which glory was passing away. The glory was not that wasn't going to be the way that God dealt with him forever. Verse 8, how will the ministry of the Spirit not be even more glorious? Now here are all the things you can do. You know the things you don't do, but God wasn't always going to deal with you that way. He's eventually going to deal with you as an adult. Yes, you can take the car. Cars are something to be afraid of when you're a child. No, don't go out in the street because that car will hit you. Now, take the car and you can go get me the groceries. You can drive to New York, Now it's a whole different thing. And isn't that even more glorious? Now cars are even more fantastic. For if the ministry of condemnation had glory, the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. So, but the idea is that we're supposed to have both. So one doesn't eliminate the other. Still don't run out into the middle of the street. I don't care how old you are. Don't run out into the middle of the street. That has not changed. Supposed to have both, but here's all the things you can do. You'll actually be driving yourself. And baby doesn't understand that. I just see ball ran out into the street. The ball's in the street. Be scared of that car. The child doesn't understand that one day I'll be driving that car because he doesn't know what that car is doing. It's just a metal thing in the street. But eventually our knowledge grows. Oh, the car takes you places. Oh, okay, it can be your friend. So in Exodus 21, verse 22, and I'm just reviewing. If men fight and hurt a woman with a child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no harm follows, he shall surely be punished according to the woman's husband imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. So just backing up to review, if men are fighting and hurt a woman with a child, the assumption, because we can get this from other cultures, is that they're arguing over who got her pregnant. She's trying to get in the middle of it, and the child gets hurt. You'll be punished accordingly. I'm just telling you, in that day, if it was obvious to them they put a hand on the stomach, the baby's kicking, and it's at least in the last trimester, you killed this baby. It was definitely alive. In their estimation, the first trimester, they don't have the same feeling that this is a live child. So they don't, so you're fined. It says, as the judge determines, you're fined accordingly. Was was it a fully formed child that was killed, or not yet fully formed? So that the judge determined that. Verse 23 says, but if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And that actually was given to keep people from going crazy. If your eye is injured, punch him in the eye, done. I remember seeing that on the playground as a kid. Okay, you come here, you slug him in the arm. Okay, now you slug him in the arm. Okay, now you're even. That's always a thing, right? Now you're even. It's done. Okay, and everybody was satisfied because we're even. Some people, you hit me in the arm, so now I'm going to chop off your foot. They want to take it to an extreme. This actually was given to prevent an extreme. It wasn't given to create one. An eye for an eye, hand for an eye, hand, foot for foot, whatever the injury is, let it be reciprocal. Uh, because in other cultures, it wasn't. You could choose whatever punishment you wanted. You gave me a black eye, I'm chopping off your leg. You could choose whatever punishment. And God's saying, no, it's got to be an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. So it wasn't, ooh, an eye for an eye. I'm going to cut out your eye. It was keep it in proportion. If a man strikes the eye, this is Exodus 21, verse 26. If a man strikes the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it, then he has to let him go free. So if you strike it and destroy, I don't care how much money they owe you. And again, these are servants who were there for 6 years because they owe money. You're gonna let them go in the 7th year, but you're gonna have to let them go in the 7th month. Because look at the injury that you've done. And this is nowhere else in any other culture around the Middle East. And that was to keep the master from being abusive and just thinking, I don't like that you were. Yeah, you can punish if the servant is not doing what they're supposed to do. You have to have some means of punishing them. So you can whip him, but if you injure them, then you have to let them go through. And that's again a deterrent for the owner, the employer at that point. Here's a deterrent for you so that you don't go crazy. If he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he should let him go free. Just for the sake of the tooth, just the tooth. You hit him that hard and you let him go free. Knowing if I go out of control, I'm going to lose this person, that helps restrain me. But Jesus goes further. So here's the restraint. I'm doing this to keep you from going crazy. That's the no. That's to the baby. No, let me put restraints around that. Dishwater. I can't keep saying dishwater. The soap, the dish. I keep thinking that because that's the kitchen's right over there. So you might put a restraint over your Dove and your Ivory liquids so the baby doesn't drink it. But Jesus is going to say, now let me say all the great things you can do with it. So now that we've got the restraint down and you're older, I can tell you what things you can do with it. So he doesn't want us to be stuck there. You can imagine being 40 years old, you're in your own home, and you're not allowed to use the dishwater, the dish soap. So Jesus in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38, and we went over this last week, and I'm just zooming through it, says, you've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That was as a restraint. But I'm telling you to resist an evil person. Don't get drawn into it. So to keep you from going crazy, we had that law. But I'm saying resist an evil person. Don't, oh, now I've got to get you back. And don't get drawn into that. But again, if you are in an abusive relationship and you are a wife and a husband is hitting you, this is not what Jesus is referring to. If you're a husband and a wife is hitting you, this is not what Jesus is referring to. It's talking about among equals, an eye for an eye. This is equals, arguing that whole law was two men are fighting over this woman. Okay, don't get drawn into the fight in the first place. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. Boom. Here's a new way to go. Say, boy, you're really upset. Here, you need to get that out of your system. I see you need to really get that out of your system. So turn and offer him the right also. Uh, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let them have your cloak also. Here, you needed my coat. Also have this. It's a different way of approaching it as opposed to you took mine, I take yours. There's no advancement. How does it end then? Because now I'll need to get you back and you need to get me back. There's no ending to it. Somebody's got to be the bigger person and say, fine, if you need to have that, you can have that if it's that important to you. Okay. Because that changes them. Clearly you're upset. Because now we want to get to the root of why the person's upset. It's not just about, I hit you and why'd you hit me? What's going on with you? Why'd you just yell at me? Why'd you honk at me? Why? Let's discuss this and get to the root of what the problem is, as opposed to you honk at me and I honk back. You honk at me. Let me check and see. I wonder why that person honked at me. Did I miss the light? What? Don't always just respond back. Is that person have a bad day? Did I do something wrong? This is a new way of thinking. Give to him who asks from you, and from him who wants to borrow, do not turn away. You have heard that it was said, you shall, now, it was heard that it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So let's check that out. Where'd they get that from? Did God write in the Bible, love your neighbor, hate your enemy? In Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17, it says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. Now, it is talking about your brother, but you shall not hate your brother in your heart. So God has to start here. His plan is, let me start and teach you how to treat your brother, and then I will expand your definition of who your brother is. So if I can convince you not to hold grudges and not to have vengeance against your brother, then I'm going to surprise you and say, by the way, that person next to you, that they're also your brother. And this is also your brother. And that's also your brother. So I'm going to expand the definition of who, if I can convince you of this. So I'm going to let you know, I love everybody. A new commandment I give you. Love it, love everybody. What? Yeah. And I was teaching you how to love your brother, and you're not really good at that yet. You're still fighting amongst yourselves. But I'm expanding that now. So in Leviticus 19, it says, you should not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. So you can rebuke him if he's trying to draw you into sin. You can say, no, I'm not going to sin like that. But you still don't hate him. But you can rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. Like, no, I'm not going to get drawn into your foolishness. Verse 18, you shall not take vengeance when somebody does something, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And it doesn't say anywhere, hate your enemies. So Jesus is saying, so then why did Jesus says, you've heard it says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy? Because they put two different things together, right? And made that one saying, and they were passing that on. And they do that with the Bible. They take one verse from here in Genesis and one verse from Malachi and stick them together and say, well, the Bible says in the beginning, he's going to destroy the world or something. You go, no, those are two separate things. How'd you put those together? In Deuteronomy chapter 25, when God is teaching them, you need to stay away from these other cultures who teach that you should sacrifice your children to idols, and they teach all sorts of crazy stuff. You've got to stay away from these cultures. I'm trying to teach you what is right and wrong, and you can't be influenced by these people, so stay away from them. And some of them are just out to get you, period. So he says, remember in Deuteronomy 25:17, remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Egypt? How he met you on the way and attacked your rear ranks, all the stragglers at your rear when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. So remember who Amalek is. You had just come out of Egypt. God saying it's understandable that people whose land that you had to go through were nervous about you. Why are you coming? We were nervous about trespassers, right? It was their land, and now 500,000 people are going to come through the middle of our land. Are you going to destroy our crops? Are you going to try to attack us? So they would always ask permission. Can we come through? And some would say, yes, you can come through. And some would say, no. And then they had to go around. Amalek, um, they were nowhere near Amalek and his people. They were traveling away, and Amalek came up behind and just started to attack the kids, the stragglers, the old people, the sick, because that's who are going to be at the end of any line, right? The people who are older and can't walk as fast, people who are not doing, and one by one they're just picking them off and killing them because Amalek had a supernatural hatred for Israel. These people you cannot reason with. So remember how he met you on the way and attacked your rear ranks, all the stragglers at your rear when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. He had just heard about the Red Sea parting. He didn't care. I'm going to kill these people. I hate them. Amalek had a supernatural hate. Why? Therefore, it shall be when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around in the land in which your Lord God has given you. So when you finally get to cross over the Jordan and you're finally in the land that I've given you, and I've given you rest from your enemies, you've made peace with this one and that one, and I've removed this one, and you're just minding your business. When he's given you rest from your enemies all around in the land in which the Lord your God has given you to possess as an inheritance, that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Amalek is going to try to destroy you. They have a supernatural hatred for you, so you're going to have to get rid of Amalek. Genesis 36. So, again, God's not crazy, right? So when the serial killer is and slaps you on the right cheek, you don't have to turn to him the left. When the person who's just a sociopath, your brother who has a beef with you, let's talk this out. What's the problem? But the crazy person who's just crazy, God's not saying to that person, well, I had to turn the right cheek. I know he just slaughtered everyone in my family, but I just said, go ahead, get me next. God's not stupid. That's not what he's talking about. Amalek is that kind of person. Amalek, they just, for no reason, are going to just start attacking you, killing you. So, why does Amalek have the supernatural hatred? So, Genesis 36, verse 12 says, now, Timnah was the concubine of Eliphaz. Who's Eliphaz? It says Esau's son. This is Genesis 36 and 12. So we are now dealing with the children of Israel, children of Jacob, children of Israel. Israel's brother is Esau, and he has his own line of people. God has chosen Jacob and his line to set them apart and teach them his way so they can be an example to the rest of the world. He's not hating the rest of the world. He just needs to, I need to take this student, come up to the front of the class with me, and I'm going to use you as an example. Then everybody else will see. I can't do 36 examples at once. I can do one and show you. And now that this person, I've used him as an example, I would demonstrate. I would take Keith Cox. Keith, come on up here, and I'm going to demonstrate on you this drama exercise. When people see how you do it, then everybody else will understand it. So I picked Jacob's kids, but Esau I did not pick. Now, Timnah was the concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bore Amalek to Eliphaz. So Amalek is Esau's grandson. These were the sons of Ada, Esau's wife. Okay, and then they go. So there was Esau's concubine and Esau's wife. Eliphaz is son to Esau, and this is his concubine, and then his grandson. He's hearing the stories of how Esau was cheated out of his birthright and is developing this hatred for them. I am living all by myself in these mountains, and I could have had all this incredible stuff, and it's Jacob's fault and his kids. So he's had all this time to ruminate and think, and he just hates them. Amalek and his kids, that's what he's passed on. He's passed on his hatred to his kids. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 8, talking about King Saul, says he took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive. The Amalekites are the kids of Amalek, and Agag is the king of them, right? And don't forget, they have had a supernatural hatred for Israel all along. They didn't see Israel for 200 years, and then Israel comes out of Egypt, and they immediately start attacking because they've just been festering this anger and this hatred for 200 years. Agag is the king of them, the king of the Amalekites. But he took him alive. God had said, don't you let him alive. And he utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. This is what Saul did, except for the king of the Amalekites. But Saul and the people spared Agag, the king of the Amalekites, even though God said, do not spare him. And the best of the sheep and the oxen and the fatlings and the lambs and all that was good, I'm going to spare him. And all this stuff. And God said, destroy it all. Amalek has a supernatural hatred for you that's psychotic and cannot be tamed. There are people, when they're in that position, you have to remove them. You don't say, oh, forgive the spree killer, the serial killer, just, because they're sweet. They're a child of God. God's saying, you have to remove that person. They are totally controlled by the devil. So he kept him alive and all that was good and was unwilling to utterly destroy them, but everything despised and worthless they utterly destroyed. But somehow they felt that the king of the Amalekites, who'd been attacking them for hundreds of years, was worth something, kept them alive. In Esther chapter 3, verse 1. So this is Agag, right? King of the Amalekites. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. That's how you would make Agag into Agagite. Anyway, Haman is a descendant of the king. Did not destroy him when he was told to. He went out, fathered his son. That son had this, right? So Haman is descended directly. He's an Amalekite, descended directly from King Agag, and advanced him and set him his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were with the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman. So they are in Persia. Everybody's bowing to the king. Israel has been captured and they are there. However, they all paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai would not bow or pay homage to him. Mordecai is the descendant of King Saul, who was supposed to have killed Agag. So you've got the descendant of King Saul, descendant of King Agag, face to face. Mordecai is not bowing down to this guy who should not have been alive because he's an Amalekite, and God has said, stop with the Amalekites. They're going to kill you someday. Their hate for you cannot be restrained. Esther chapter 3 verse 5 says, and when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai, like he's really strong. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. So my family has hated them. We Amalekites have hated them forever. Now is my opportunity. I can use this thing that Mordecai refuses to bow to me. I can use this against him. And I'm going to destroy them all the Jews, which is what they've been wanting to do from the beginning. So when God says in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 19, therefore it shall be when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around, in the land which the Lord your God has given you to possess as an inheritance, that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not, don't forget this, because they're constantly going to be trying to destroy you. Constantly. That is their heritage. I'm making this up, but it is as though Hitler was like a descendant of the Amalekite or something, you know. Some people have this supernatural hatred for the Jews. It makes no sense. Some people, it's devilish, right? So when you're hearing people talk about, oh, those Jews, that's the spirit of Amalek. That's devilish, right? But in the Bible, when it's talking about he's your enemy, you got to hate him, they took love your neighbor, but hate your enemy and just made this one saying. And God really wasn't even talking about hate all your enemies. He was specifically just talking about Amalek. So Jesus shows up and said, you know how they've been saying love your neighbor and hate your enemies? Let me clarify. Verse 44, I say to you, love your enemies. Not just put up with them, not hide from them, not because your neighbor can you be your enemy's now your neighbor. Your enemy's living next door to you. Remember I told you to love your neighbor? What if you're Jewish living in Anaheim and Iranian person lives next door to you? Love your neighbor. You can't. Your people have historically hated, but you got to let that go now, right? Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Because now that's what same thing. Remember I told you to don't hate your brother. If they do something crazy, don't hate them. Now I'm saying I'm expanding that. This is what I told you. I'm just expanding it. That you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the just and the just, because God treats everybody the same. It doesn't rain on one side of the street and it doesn't rain on the other side of the street. Now somebody's going to say, well, one time I saw it only rained on one side of the street. I'm just saying in general, God's making it rain on everybody. He's putting sunshine. He's treating everybody the same so that they all have the same opportunity to respond to him. No one can stand before God and say, well, you treated me differently. No. You got the same sunshine everybody else did. You got the same rain. You just chose to hate me. So when we're reading through, and we're almost done with Exodus chapter 21. We're just understanding that all the don'ts, all the no's, is for babies, but that God has an expansion on it. So we're not going to freak out when he says that if you do this, you will die. He expanded on that. He explained it. He's expecting us to look at the whole counsel of God and said, we can't say to our parents, you told me never to stick anything in the socket. Well, I was talking about forks and knives and the things you wanted to stick into the socket. Now you can stick things in because you understand the difference. You still can't stick a fork or a knife in the socket. It's not like I was wrong. But I had to say, don't put anything in there because you didn't know how to differentiate. Now that you know how to differentiate, no problem. Okay. If an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall be stoned. This lesson for my sister, because she said it helps if you say, what's the thought they're supposed to take on it, is the value of life. God's trying to teach the value of life, of every life. So if an ox gores a man or woman to death, then the ox has to be stoned, because we have to say, look, that's a horrible thing. That animal kills, and we do that to this day. You know, there's a mountain lion, and oh, that's cute, until the mountain lion comes down and kills a child. It's okay, we have to now kill that mountain lion because that mountain lion is a sort of mountain lion, or has reached that stage in his brain where he's attacking humans and killing them. We should not. So that'd be our reason to kill the mountain lion. We don't kill it before then. But if he's fine, leave him alone. But if now he's tasted blood, and so now that's we put them to death now. And God's just saying to do the same thing. But it says, its flesh shall not be eaten. I don't want you to use this as an opportunity to, ooh, we just killed this cow. Let's barbecue it, because that's disrespectful for what the cow did. you're profiting off of that horrible murder, and we're having a thing like that today where we say, I don't know if a serial killer should you should make a movie out of their life and he should get the money or something. Because that's like he's making money off of what just happened. So you own the ox, your ox killed somebody, and you go, oh, well, I guess I'll barbecue this ox now. You're kind of profiting off of what happened. It says, its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be acquitted. I, I'm not gonna, you don't kill the owner of the ox because of what his ox did, unless, in verse 29 says, but if the ox tended to thrust with its horns in times past, and it has been made known to the owner, this this ox is always trying to kill people, and you didn't do anything about it. It says it's been made known to the owner, and he has not kept it confined, so that it has killed a man or a woman. Then the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. What's excellent about this, again, he's making you responsible. You've been warned, and then that's your recklessness. So you knew that you had something that was dangerous to other people's lives, and you didn't care about it. We hold that person accountable today. You did something that was dangerous. You didn't put a sign up warning people there's an open ditch here, or we go so far as you have to put up a sign that says wet floor in case somebody comes by and slips. That's their fault, they didn't read the sign. But if you knew you'd done something, created a dangerous situation, then you didn't warn anybody, and somebody walks up and slips and injures themselves, then we can hold you liable because you knew what you had done. So this is where we get this from. The other good thing about that is, so there's killed a man or a woman. He's making sure you understand both lives are valuable. Men's and women's lives are equally valuable. Other cultures, it just said, if they killed a man, God is teaching them, and he's having to teach this to them because that's not how the first way they thought in those days. Because the way you made money was with strength, and you had to dig, and women were not trained to be as physically strong as men. Women were, no, you don't do that sort of thing. You go over there, you just have kids. That's what your value is. Men were considered more valuable than women. They weren't. God didn't consider them that way. There's nothing in the Bible that teaches men are more valuable than women. But the culture thought that. So God's slipping this in. You have to treat it the same way, hoping that they eventually will look at that over the years and eventually get to the point where they see men and women the same. That's why Paul, 2,000 years later, is saying there is no male or female in Christ. God doesn't have that sort of hierarchy. Men get to do this and women don't. There's no Jew or Greek, and there's no us and them. God doesn't have that. So he started it here, hopefully that they would eventually change. Exodus 21:30. If there is imposed on him a sum of money, so this is to the person who your animal has killed somebody. If there's imposed on him a sum of money, then he shall pay to redeem his life, whatever's imposed on him. So if your animal killed somebody and it's your fault, this is now the choice of the person who's like, you gored my son. Your ox gored my son. So I can have you killed, but that doesn't bring back my son. Doesn't, to be honest, they were thinking my son was doing this and he was doing that and he was responsible for all these things, and now I've lost that. Not only have I lost my son, but I've lost all that he would have done. And we do that today. We calculate somebody's worth and what their as far as punishment when something has happened to them, what would their life have been like had this terrible thing not happened to them. A friend of mine is an actor. He's in his 20s, early 20s, really good looking, and was getting commercials all the time and starting to get television series. And literally, he's at the bottom of a hill in his car, and a cement truck came loose that was parked, smashed into him, and now he's paraplegic. They had to calculate what they thought his earnings would have been, like, because now he can do nothing. And so that was part of the calculation. Had he lived, he could have made $15 million total in his lifetime from his acting career. So that's how much you have to pay. Or he could have made $100 million. That's how much they had to calculate. What has this person lost? And so he's saying you might look on it that way. If there's posing him a sum of money, if I look at instead of killing you as though that's going to make up for something, my son would have made this amount of money, and so pay the fine instead of you dying, which doesn't solve anything. The you're going to die part is there for the owner of the ox. God needs that person to be scared so that when somebody comes and says, your ox is starting to thrust and you need to be careful because he's going to kill somebody one day. That owner needs to think, ooh, if he kills someone, they're going to kill me. So I better listen and I better keep him confined. But now that God's talking to the person on the other end of where the victim, where something happened to their child or to their wife or to their husband or whoever. And he's saying, you may not want that person to die. So what if you instead calculate how much that person would have been worth, what they would have earned? So if there's imposed on him a sum of money, then he shall pay to redeem his life. Okay, so instead of you dying, pay this amount. Whatever it is, whatever is imposed on him. Now, so this became more common. Instead of demanding someone's death, you have to pay damages. We do that still. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 8, it says, the ransom of a man's life is his riches. But the poor does not hear a rebuke, or does not get a threat. So he's saying, interestingly, a rich person, people will charge more. That my son was worth $1 million, right? Because they can see how rich this person is. If the person is poor, my son was worth $1,000 because the person doesn't have $1 million. So the ransom of man's life, in some cases, people will claim a lot because they're really rich. And the proverb, Solomon's just stating a fact. But the poor does not get the same kind of rebuke because people know they don't have as much money. In Psalm chapter 49, verse 6 through 9, it says, those who trust in their wealth and boast in the multitude of their riches, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm rich now, so I don't have to lock up my ox because if he does something, I got money to pay for it. And some people huge companies calculate that way sometimes, right? I've got this product out there, I've got this car, and they do some sort of algorithm and they're able to figure out the damage that might cause. Like, it'll cost us $20 million to recall every single car, or $100 million to recall every single car and fix this little component that only one out of, every 8,000 people are going to have this little problem with it. So do we spend $100 million or do we let the 100 people that are going to end up suing us sue us each for $1 million, and okay, that'd be $100 million, which is, but it's going to cost $500 million to fix it, but only $100 million. So sometimes a really rich person can just calculate that way, that, let him find me, let him sue me, I've got the money for it. So God always recognizes, when I say this, then here's the unintended consequences of that. When I say this, here's the unintended consequences of that. He can see ahead. So in Psalm 49, verse 6, he says, those who trust in their wealth and boast in the multitude of their riches, none of them can by any means redeem his brother, nor give to God a ransom for him. I mean, you don't have enough money to really pay for somebody's life. So don't think that you can. For the redemption of their souls is costly, and it shall cease forever. In fact, and here's what David is really talking about, is that let's say this person is an evil person and you don't have enough money to redeem their soul. So you think your money can just redeem, I can redeem this person, redeem that person, oh, that person, but what about their soul? Do you have enough money to pay for that? Like, no. So you may have enough money that no matter what anybody did, I got enough money to pay, not their soul. For the redemption of their souls is costly, and it shall cease forever. Like, don't forever be in hell. That he should continue to live eternally and not see the pit. You can't do something to keep them from seeing the pit. Your money can't save their soul. So I know your money thinks I can pay for anything. But if they're a mess, you have to do your best to witness to that person because your money can't save a soul. So if you're in your calculation thinking you can pay for anything, here's the one thing that I want you to remember that you can't pay for. Is somebody's eternal life in heaven. Numbers chapter 35, verse 30 says, whoever kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the testimony of witnesses. But one witness is not sufficient testimony against a person for the death penalty. Moreover, you shall take no ransom for the life of a murderer who was guilty of death, but he shall surely be put to death. So even though earlier I said if your animal gores somebody and you were reckless and they could possibly sue you and get money from you, no ransom shall be given for the life of a murderer who's just guilty of that. So don't then transfer this to I'll just go around killing people and I'll just pay people off. Nope. That's not how it works. I don't want you to take that and think, oh, I can do whatever I want and I'll just pay. You'll be put to death. So he's always balancing it off. Here's one way to think of it if you're the victim, and here's another way to think of it if you're the person. I need to have enough laws that stop you from doing bad, but I need to have enough laws that if you were the victim, that you look at the person and not hate them and try to get vengeance, and so there's two ways that God is looking. He's seeing both things. Almost done here. Exodus chapter 21, verse 31. Whether it has gored a son or gored a daughter, according to this judgment it shall be done to him. If the ox gores a male or a female servant. So I don't want you to think it's just adults that have worth. Remember, he says man or woman. In some cultures, only adults had worth. He says, even if it's a son or a daughter, everybody has worth. God's trying to give everybody worth. However, we understand, let me put the value then on certain people so that you don't go out of control and say, you kill this person, $5 billion. I have to now talk to the people who are the victims of this and give you your own restraints. Verse 32 of Exodus 21 says, if the ox gores a male or female servant, he shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be put to death. So you don't go crazy. 30 shekels of silver. Now, he began to put limits. Leviticus 27:3 said, if your valuation is of a male from 20 years old up to 60 years old, then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. So for just a normal person, it'd be 50. For a slave, it's 30. Now, in Matthew chapter 26, verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give to me if I delivered him to you? And they counted out 30 pieces of silver. Jesus, he's just worth a servant. So that was the least amount you can give for somebody was 30 shekels. If you are an owner, a man, or a normal person, 50 shekels. But if you're just a slave, 30 shekels. So what will you give me for the life of Jesus? 30 shekels. And that was their way of insulting him. So in Exodus chapter 31, like 33, if a man opens a pit, and then we're finishing up with 21. Really, that should have been translated uncovers a well, because they would dig wells. They wouldn't just wells. Sounds like I said whales. Wells. Uh, they wouldn't just dig pits and leave them open. They would dig a well to get water, but then you had to cover it. First of all, so dirt and dust doesn't get into it. But if it's dry, sometimes they would, I don't need to cover this. It's dry. But people are going by. They don't know you dug a well there and your horse falls in, you fall in. So if a man opens a pit, meaning uncovers a well, doesn't cover it back up, or if a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make it good. He shall give money to their owner. But the dead animal shall be his. So uh, the owner of the pit, okay, your donkey fell into my well. I'm really sorry for that. Here is money for that, and I'll take the dead animal. So I do get the dead animal, I, but I have to pay. And this is not the same as your animal gored somebody. That was just a mistake. I just didn't cover it up, but I'm still liable. I mean, I still, you know, but I get it. I'm going to eat it. Somebody's going to have to eat it. And it's okay to eat it in that case because it didn't do anything. The ones that we don't want you to eat are that ox gored somebody. Ooh, let's barbecue it. No, because that will teach you that when somebody dies, we have a barbecue. Mm-mm. But if the animal accidentally trips, falls into the pit, that's okay then to eat the animal, but you got to pay that owner. Last couple verses. If one man's ox hurts another's, so not a human, but they hurt each other so that it dies, then they shall sell the live one, sell it, and divide the money from it. So these two animals somehow got into a fight. You have to sell it. That's the punishment, is to sell it, but you can divide the money between the two of you because we're assuming that both animals were involved in the fight and just simply one of them won. And this happens, people are walking their dogs down the street and the two dogs start barking at each other. Right, they're both doing it. Sell the one because one is dead and we still want you to value life. There has to be some sort of punishment, but they were equally involved. And you can divide the money between the two of you. And the dead ox shall also, they divide. And you both then get to, cut it up. So this is even. We're not placing blame. There is a punishment for it. But I don't want you to go around and teach your ox to gore other oxes just so you can get money. So you can divide the money and then you divide everything so that it's equal. So there's no advantage to anyone because you could slowly just start to, oh, if you kill that ox, I get to have that ox. No, you're going to divide it. So this is just, God's always trying to think ahead. What crazy thing might somebody do with this law? And the last verse, or if it was known that the ox tended to thrust in times past. So if they knew, so if you're surprised by it, like suddenly, oh, they start fighting, what's going on? Oh, then just divide everything and sell the one. But if it was known that the ox tended to thrust in times past and its owner has not kept it confined, he shall surely pay ox for ox. Like you got to pay for the whole thing. And the dead animal, you can keep the dead animal, but you have to pay the whole thing because you knew that your ox tended to do that. And again, and the whole point is, we want you to teach that all lives have value. All lives, men, women, slaves, free, animals. We have to put a value on all of it so that you just don't think, oh, well, that happened, like other cultures do. In other cultures, only the males had value. And God said, nope, men and women, sons and daughters, animals, they all have value and there has to be some sort of consequence. So I'm separating you from these other cultures who don't think this way, and I'm going to train you. But eventually, when Jesus comes, I'm going to complete this and explain vengeance is not always the way. It's always the solution. There's other solutions other than attacking and getting them back and an eye for an eye. But I got to start here because this is all you know. You're just babies. So let me give you the constraints that I would give a baby. And then as you become more adults, then I can give you the rest. And it doesn't eliminate this other stuff, but now I'm just expanding your way of thinking of it. Okay, so we will go into Exodus chapter 22, where it changes, where God no longer gives um, punishments, because this is case law. If this happens, here's the punishment. If this happened, here's the punishment. Now it becomes internal. If you do this, this is how I want you to think. If this, so these are probably things that maybe other people don't know about, other people can't see. They're going on inside of you. I still want you to know that I see what's happening inside of you. I see what's going on. And so here's how I want you to think regarding these actions of yours. These other actions are external. They involve somebody else being killed, somebody else, but these are your own personal actions that maybe you're the only victim of them. I still want you to think this way and know that this is wrong. And so that's what he starts next week. Okay, thank you so. Where, what happened? Oh, so thank you for tuning in oh, see, it's been in a full hour. At 11 o'clock, well, 11:10 or so, I'll be teaching in the first book of Samuel chapter 13. I'll be preaching on that. So if you want to tune in, I understand if you don't, because it's already been an hour of me. But some of you, if you'd like to uh, tune in, I think you would enjoy it. Okay, and I'll see the rest of you Wednesday, where we're in the book of John. All right, thanks so much. Bye-bye.